All right, hi everyone. My name is Megan Capobianco. I'm one of the instructors here at the DNA Learning Center. Welcome to DNA LC Live. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be doing a really cool activity today about mutant organisms. So we're going to just jump right into our activity for today. So we are going to be talking a lot about DNA mutations today. But before we can talk about mutations, let's make sure that we understand what DNA is. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have learned about DNA, whether you've been at school, but we want to get a broader idea of what DNA is. So DNA, the way I like to look at it, is this very large cookbook that includes all of the instructions on how to make a specific living thing. Now, I have DNA, you have DNA. Do you think that our DNA is the same? Now, you can go ahead and answer in the chat box. So how much of our DNA do you think we share? Do you think it's 100%? No, we're not the same people. So our DNA is definitely different. But what percent from 0 to 100 do you think that we share in common? Sometimes my students will say 1%, even 0%. That's not what we share. A lot of students will guess 50%, and that's a good guess, but actually we share 50% of our DNA with bananas. So that's definitely not how much you and I share. We share 99.9% of our DNA together. So it's that 0.1% that makes up our differences. All right. Now, when we take a closer look at the DNA strand, does anybody know what the shape of DNA is? So it's a double helix is what we call it. Some people think it looks like a twisted ladder or a spiral staircase, but we have our long strand of DNA. Now within those strands of DNA are sections called genes. Now I'm sure you've heard the term gene before, and can anyone tell me, you can go ahead again and type it into the chat box, what is a gene? What do they code for? Where do they come from? So our genes are actually inherited from our biological parents. All right, and what do our genes give us? Right. Our genes basically code for our traits. Think of some of the traits that you've inherited from your biological parents. Things like hair color, eye color, widow's peak, all right, skin tone, lots of different things. Those are just the physical traits that we have on the outside, but there's also genetic traits about how our body works as well. All right. Now, when we're talking about a gene, we're talking about just a section of that very large DNA, all of those instructions. A gene is basically, the way I think of it, a recipe that codes for that specific trait, whether it's your hair color or your eye color. Now, before a gene, though, can give you that trait, it codes for something in between. Does anybody know what a gene specifically codes for? I'll give you a hint. It's what the ribosomes make. They code for proteins. They're basically a recipe for a specific protein, which then in turn creates a specific trait. Now, what is a mutation? A mutation is basically a change that can occur within the DNA. These are random, and they can be caused by different things. They can happen during development, or they can actually be caused by certain environmental factors. But if we think about this, if this change occurs within a gene, what do you think could happen? It's definitely going to change the way that protein is made. Think about it. If a gene is a recipe, for example, if I'm making chocolate chip cookies, and something is changed within that gene, now it's telling me not to put in chocolate chips, it's telling me to put in raisins. Is my outcome going to be different? Absolutely. So that's something that happens when a mutation happens in a gene. It can affect the way a trait is expressed. Now we're going to be looking at different mutations in physical features on a specific organism today. And that is going to be Drosophila melanogaster. Does anybody know what species that is? I'll give you a little bit of a hint. So if we were to break down this word, Drosophila actually means dew-loving. You guys know dew, what collects on the blades of grass in the mornings. And then melanogaster actually means black belly. Now, I'm not sure if this is helping out at all, but this is the binomial nomenclature for fruit flies. Fruit flies are something I'm sure you're very familiar with. They're those very, very small flies that you'll see around maybe rotting food, things like fruit, okay? So that is an organism that we're going to use to take a closer look at certain traits today, or certain mutations. Now, there's a few reasons why we study fruit flies. The first reason is they're very small. Their size is great. If we're keeping fruit flies in our lab, it's nice that they're small, they can stay in containers, and they don't take a lot of effort on our part to keep them happy. If we had something like mice we were studying, we would need a lot more space, a lot more food, and a lot of effort on our part. Another reason why we study these is because they share a lot of DNA with us. They share 61% of their DNA with us. So by studying mutations in their genes can give us an idea of what the mutation could look like in a human. And the last reason why we study fruit flies is because they have a very short lifespan. So they mature very quickly and they lay a lot of eggs. So we'll be able to take a look at several generations of fruit flies in a short period of time. If we were trying to study a certain mutation being passed along to generations in humans, that would take decades. But doing that in fruit flies can take a matter of months. So before we go ahead and look at mutant fruit flies today, what do you think we need to take a look at first? What do you think would be a smart idea to look at before we look at mutants? Think about that. We're going to want to take a look at your typical fruit fly first. Basically the way a fruit fly would look in the wild. That's going to give us a good idea of what the typical traits are. That way when we go to look at mutants, we're going to be able to see what's different. So the way that we are going to look at the typical fruit flies is, actually first let me explain this. So this is a worksheet. You may have downloaded it off of our website. If you haven't, it's totally fine. But as scientists, we want to record our observations. So this is going to be a tool to help us do that. We are going to first be looking at what we call wild type. So if you're following along with your worksheet, you are going to be filling out this section up here first. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more. So there's going to be 4 traits we're going to be looking at when it comes to the wild type fruit flies. The first one is going to be their eye color. The second one is the shape of their eyes. Third one is going to be wing shape. And the last one is the color of their body. Now we have some wild type fruit flies right here. They're in a petri dish. They are no longer alive. But if you think about that, that would be pretty hard for us to study living fruit flies under a microscope if they were flying and moving around. So we are going to be using this microscope that you see right here. This is called a dissecting microscope. It's a little bit different than maybe the classroom microscopes that you have, which are compound microscopes. But they do the same thing, which is take a close look at whatever specimen we're looking at. So let's just take a look at some of the different parts of our microscope. So we have the typical stage down at the bottom where we're going to be putting our fruit flies today. We have a few different knobs. This one is going to help us focus and make our image more clear. We have another knob here, which helps us zoom in and out. We have our eyepieces, which is where I'll look through so I can see the fruit flies and focus on them. But what's really great about this microscope is we have a camera on here, and it's hooked up to a computer, so you'll be able to see what I'm seeing under the microscope today. So that's really awesome. So we are going to start off by taking our wild type fruit flies, placing them under our microscope, and I'm going to turn on the lights first. So there are 2 options when it comes to lights with these microscopes. There is a light that shines from above, and there's a light that shines from underneath. Now, we want to use the light that shines from above today because if we use a light from underneath, it drowns out a lot of the colors. And if you remember, we're trying to look for eye color and body color. So it's important that we are able to see those. So if I start to take a look, okay, I'm going to place mine underneath the microscope, look through, and I'm going to start to find fruit flies. Okay. Okay. All right, perfect. All right, so we are able to see one nice and clear. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit more for you. But we have a nice view of that fruit fly. Let's focus it a little bit more. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those traits. Focus it a little bit more. Okay, so let's take a look at some of those traits that we were looking for. So the first, remember what the first trait is that we were looking for. All right, we're looking for eye color. So what color are we seeing here on this wild type fruit fly? I'm sure we can all agree on this one. This one is going to be red. Now, the second thing that we want to look at is the shape of the eyes. Now, it might be a little bit difficult to see on this one. I'll try and zoom in a little bit more for you. But what you're going to notice is they have very big round eyes. Some of my students like to describe it as oval. That's totally fine as well. So you can put down whatever descriptive words work for you. All right, next one is the wing shape. Now, this is another one that can sometimes be a little bit difficult for us to describe, but do your best. How would you describe this wing shape? I usually describe it as a teardrop, so you can see that it goes around on the edges, but it still comes together at a point as it attaches to the fruit fly. I like the description that one of my students gave, that it looks like a flower petal. That works for me as well. And then the last thing that we want to take a look at and observe on our fruit fly is its body color. Now, this is one that can be a little bit tricky, but overall, the body color, I describe it as tan. Some people like to describe it as a yellowish brown, but we don't want to call it yellow because it's not completely yellow and it's not completely brown. So let's call it tan, somewhere in between. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our SMART presentation. We're going to include that on our worksheet. All right, so eye color, remind me again, was red. The eye shape was round. Wing shape was a teardrop, raindrop, flower petal, however you want to describe it is totally fine by me. But as long as you understand that it has that round shape to it, but then comes up to a point. And then its body color, we'll say, is tan. All right, excellent. So if we skip ahead, again, just kind of showing you, this is what we were seeing under the microscope. This is one that's alive, so just giving you a different view of that. But most importantly is we are seeing that teardrop shape of the wings. All right, so now that we have a good idea of what the wild types look like, now we can take a look at what mutant flies look like. Now, we're going to be looking for the same 4 traits when we look at these mutants. We are going to be looking for their eye color, eye shape, wing shape, and body color. Now, I have a much larger petri dish here with lots of different fruit flies in here. They are going to have all different mutations. They are not all the same. So we're going to take a look at more than one when we're viewing these. Now, before we go ahead and look at them, I do like to give you a heads up here of the different types that we may see under the microscope. Are we going to see all of them? No, but these are the possibilities that we could see. So when it comes to wing shape, there is a variety of all different types of wings, okay? We'll come back to this after we take a look and see which ones we can fit in, but they have all different names. I think that's really helpful because sometimes when we look at the wings, it's hard to describe what we're seeing. So it's good to have a name to go along with it. We'll also be looking at eye. So remember, the eye shape may be different and the eye color as well as body color. But we'll go back here and we're going to take a look under the microscope. So I'm going to take out my wild types, and now we're going to try out the mutants. Now be patient with me as I try and get ones under our microscope. It takes a moment for us to adjust it. Okay. Focus in. And right off the bat, we can see a few different ones. Now I'm going to try and scoot over a little bit. All right, and I'm going to zoom in on this one down here first. All right, so we're seeing it still has a tan body. It still has round red eyes, but there's something very different about this fruit fly than the wild types. What are you noticing is different about this one? You're probably noticing it doesn't have any wings. We actually call this apterous. Okay, so this one has no wings. So if you're following along on your worksheet, feel free to include this in the wing mutation section. It's called apterous, or if you want to put in your own words, no wings. All right, that's a pretty interesting one. Let's see what else we've got here. Ooh, this one as well. So this one has the teardrop wings, the tan color body. It has round eyes, but what is different about those eyes? They're definitely not the typical red color. These are white eyes. We definitely want to include that as well on our worksheet. Under eye mutations, you're going to write white eyes. All right, I'm going to zoom out. Let's see what else we can find under here. Okay. All right, so we're seeing another one up close. And again, we're seeing a different wing mutation. Now this one it's not missing wings, but its wings are what we would consider crumpled. They're there, they exist, their wings. It's just much smaller. All right, let's see what else. Let's see if we could find just a few more. All right, so let's zoom. We're just going to try and get this guy in the middle so we can have a nice clear view. There's a few here, so we can take a look at them all. Okay. I'm seeing another eye mutation here. We're seeing black eyes on this fruit fly that's on the left-hand side. Okay. The one in the middle, if we look carefully, I'm pretty sure that one would be considered apterous as well. I'm not seeing any wings on that one. And now this last one. This one's interesting. Now, on its face, we may be seeing something extra there. Does anyone want to take a guess as to what that could be there? If I'm correct, this may have a mutation called antennapedia, and that's where an extra set of legs grow out of the head of the fruit fly. So that's a really cool one right there. So that's the one all the way on the left that you may be seeing. So antennapedia. All right, excellent, very nice. All right, we are going to go back to our SMART presentation and let's fill in some of those things. Now we saw black eyes. And we saw, what was the other color we saw? We saw white. Now, in our observations, we didn't see any different eye shapes, but I'll show you some of those different eye shapes as we go to our next slide. But we just typically saw the round eyes. Wing shape. If we go ahead and take a look at that guide. We saw apterous, we saw crumpled, and as I was going around, did anybody see anything else? Maybe you caught something that I didn't catch. A lot of times I wind up seeing dumpy wings. They almost look like teardrops, but they have a different shape towards the end. All right, so I'm going to include apterous, crumpled. Up, and I put that in eye shape. So let's see if we can move that one down. Perfect. Wing shape. All right, eye shape. That was the one that we didn't see anything. So body color, did we see a black body? I can't remember, but I'm going to put it there. Sometimes we see that instead of having a tan body, they can actually have a black body. Now let's take a look at some of the things that maybe we didn't see under the microscope. So we see all of these different options with the wings, but with the eyes, something that can be tricky for us to find is bar eyes and lobe eyes. As you can see, they're much smaller than the typical eye of a fruit fly. And then we also have the two different colors, which we luckily got to observe under the microscope. Now let's think about this for a moment. If a fruit fly has lobe eyes, we're seeing how tiny that eye is. Do you think that's going to help that fruit fly in the wild? What do you think? It's most likely not going to help it out. The advantage of having large round eyes is so that they can see their surroundings and therefore maybe find food or even get away from danger. So having smaller eyes on a fruit fly probably isn't going to help them out. Same thing with what we saw first, apterous, no wings. Do you think that that fruit fly is going to survive in the wild? Probably not, whether it's because it can't get to food or it's easy prey. But regardless, it's most likely not going to survive, and therefore it won't reproduce and pass along that gene to its offspring. All right, and these are just a few other examples from actual pictures. We can see the white eyes, black body, different color eyes here as well, and then again, different mutations in the wings. We have crumpled wings here, and we have curly wings there. So any kind of mutation that we're seeing here is probably not going to help it survive. What about the body color? So this one is actually like a very light, almost like a yellow. Why do you think fruit flies are tan? It's most likely because that's the color of their surroundings, so therefore it's almost like they get to camouflage in, and they're less likely to be seen by any predators. Same thing with the darker color, they'll stand out a bit more. Now this was the one that we think that we saw under the microscope called Antennapedia, so just giving you a really cool close-up view of this one. So this is your typical wild type, and then on this side you can see that there is an extra set of legs growing out of its head. Now some of my students like to think that this would actually be advantageous. This would be helpful to the fruit fly. But if you think about it, even though it's cool, would it help us to have another set of legs growing out of our head? Probably not. So even though it's an exciting change for us to observe, it's most likely not going to help out that fruit fly. Now, mutations can happen to all different species, including us as well. But one mutation that can happen in a gene can affect the pigment of that organism. Now, if we take a look at these three organisms, we can see that they don't have any pigment. That's known as albinism. Now, if we're talking about animals in the wild, though, why would this be a disadvantage for these species? Let's talk about the lion first, okay? Obviously not the typical color of a lion. Lions tend to have that tannish brown color. They have that color because think of their environment, where they normally are. That's the color of their surroundings, so it helps them blend in. But if we had a white lion, the chances of it being able to blend in and sneak up on their prey is less likely. Then they're not going to be able to eat, and therefore they may starve. And then this one down here. Now, maybe you can tell by looking at it, but we have our mutated sea turtle right there. I think these are baby sea turtles. But this sea turtle is surrounded by other sea turtles. It's hard to see because they blend in with their surrounding. Now picture yourself as a bird that's hunting from above. Which one is it going to pick out? The white one or all of the other ones? It's probably going to go for the one that its eyes can find. And again, that's why these traits may not be passed along, because these organisms may most likely are not going to reach the stage in their life where they're going to be reproducing and then in turn passing along that gene to their offspring. Remember, we inherit our genes from our biological parents. All right, so thank you guys so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you liked looking at these fruit flies. And I believe we're going to be keeping the chat on for a little bit longer if you have some questions for our moderator. Thanks so much, guys.